Thank you very much, Minister Champion, for coming on to Radio Tanda Adelaide.
Happy to be here.
Well, now, I was going to start off by mentioning that you and the Premier, and actually another important senior person, Don Farrell, coming from the same trade union. But now you've just announced yesterday, I think, a map or some restrictions on where we can have adult entertainment venues in Adelaide, sex shops and strip clubs. Can you tell us a bit about that? Why is this even an issue?
Well, particularly in the East End, there are a few applications for adult entertainment services, strip joints, and it was felt that, so many residents, businesses and the City Council had spent so much time curating the East End. So, fine dining, outdoor streetscapes. The council itself has spent a lot of money on things, and of course, it's been an area of redevelopment and urban renewal, and so there was just a feeling that that was not the appropriate place to have it, and that there would be more appropriate places, but there weren't any planning controls. So the City of Adelaide went away and did a code amendment, rezoning change, and there were just some sensible policies about where you can put these establishments and where you can't. Not making any judgments about people who attend them or anything like that, but just making a judgment about where they should be, and also where they are about the public interface with the street, the sort of advertising they might use, the sort of lighting they might use, and the like, and just giving the council a bit more power to properly curate that, so that people who want to go there can go there, but if you're walking down the street, you're not visually kind of assaulted by various graphic photographs and the like. So it's just a bit of care and control for the city, and to make it a nice place to visit and live in.
And so there are specific areas where these establishments cannot be located.
Well, sort of residential areas,
Yes.
near places of worship, the terraces, our main boulevards, King William Street and the squares. So there'll be a few places like Hindley Street's an obvious place where they'll be. And it just basically means that the rest of the city, the residential parts of the city, and where you might have churches, for instance, and schools,
maybe schools,
just a
yes.
a more careful kind of policy around, not allowing them, or if they are allowed, that they have to have certain kind of restrictions on the advertising and the like.
Yes. Now, I was saying that you've got quite an interesting portfolio of portfolios. So you're Minister for Housing and Urban Development, Housing Infrastructure, and for Planning, and you're a member of the Executive Council. So let's go back to this, where I was going to start with the Premier. Do you get preferential treatment, having been an ex-mate, or not ex-mate, ex-colleague of Peter Malinowskis?
No, I mean, it was a bit different back in those days at the shoppies. Don was our boss, and the Premier was, I suppose, I was a more senior employee in many ways than the Premier is now. So now the Premier is the boss, and I'm one of his ministers, such as the passage of time and whatnot. But he was always an impressive young man, and is an impressive Premier. Good Premier for our state. So that longevity obviously assists you in your relationship. I'm not sure if it's preferential treatment. I get the tough jobs, but he has some confidence in me doing them.
Yes, so you've mentioned this in your first speech. You said you have a faction of two, but also in both your first speeches here and in Canberra, you've referenced the urban renewal as it being important. So now that you've got that portfolio, can you bring us up to date on what you're doing in this field?
Well, yeah, look, urban renewal typically happens where we have, in South Australia, it's typically where you've had old housing trust places built in the 50s, built for a different time and place. I was taken back to government housing. My mum was a teacher in Elizabeth. and it was no government housing was no different to, it's where most people started their sort of journey to home ownership and the like. And it's been the housing trust in particular has been a big part of this state. And typically, what we've got is large land holdings and old houses. So if you look down at Seaton's, probably the most recent example. 400 houses, but small houses on big blocks, and when we redevelop it, we can get 1,400 apartments, houses, townhouses, normal detached houses as well. So um, urban renewal is very important. You can improve the quality of housing, you can improve the numbers of housing, you can get actually better parks as well while you're doing it. And you can build, if you look at Bowden and places like that, you can build in a lot of social amenity as well, cafes and restaurants and the like as well. So it's a mixed picture, of course. It's not a perfect process building anything, whether it's a driveway, a home, a shed, or a whole suburb. You're gonna get some things right and some things wrong, and you just try and learn as you go.
Yes, well, actually, Bowden, I think, is a very nice development. We like to go there with my wife, and the Plant 4, for example, it brings a nice social environment to the housing around the place. And you've got some interesting things happening around Prospect as well.
Yeah, look, there's a number of things happening around Prospect. We've got a lot of private development there, which is good. We've got Prospect Corner, which is down near the old Reepham Hotel and across the road from Bunnings. 100 apartments, 208 townhouses, right next to a train station. It'll not be as big a cafe as Plant 4, but a small cafe for community. And up at Prospect Oval, of course, the redevelopment of the Oval to make the Oval better, but also apartments up there as well.
So actually, yes, now you just remind me, how do you go with the public discourse and debate around it? So I know, for example, there's been some interesting things happening around the towers, I was going to say Twin Towers, just behind Parliament House, which has been a bit controversial.
Well, whenever you build things, there's going to be public feedback. But it's important to remember that that's people giving their feedback. It's not a veto. It's meant all too often people say, oh, well, 70% of the submissions are against it. But, most often than not, the people who are for it are not motivated to write in as opposed to the people who are against something.
Yes.
And it's typically the people who are against something who are if out and about and
And vocal.
organised and the like.
Yep.
But that doesn't mean that public submissions are not important. They often make really good, suggestions and feedback about traffic or aesthetics. There are always a section of the community who are against the building of tall buildings in particular. There's people who don't like that sort of architecture, and that's fair enough. But that's not the way you can design a city. If you have a
Yes.
city, you've got to, I suppose, zone it for a certain amount of growth, or accept that you're not going to be a modern, vibrant city. So it's important to listen to people. On the most of the developments, we don't actually get that much feedback. If you look at somewhere like South Beach, generally people are in favour of it. There wasn't anybody who was really against it, and so the submission numbers were actually quite low. It's where you get controversial developments that the community are interested in that you get a lot of submissions.
Yes, well, that South Beach is very an interesting opening, given that a lot of development, I understand, is happening in the north. But now your government has brought back public social housing, which is an important development. I've often wondered about maybe cooperative buying and financing as a way to reduce costs or to make it easier for people with low means. Could that be part of your policies, maybe looking ahead, or are you looking at it already?
Well, we're already doing shared equity loans, which is the way most young professionals now get into the housing market. They do a shared equity loan through Homestart. They buy one of our products. We've also got rent to own,
Rent to
which is
buy?
a
Yep.
new model. Yeah, yeah. So they're both pathways into the market. Cooperative housing is, of course, big in Europe. They have in different sections of Europe, they have big cooperatives that are really running what would be the equivalent of the housing trust or
Yeah.
community housing here. And that's a model particular to Europe. It's not something, we have had small cooperatives over in Australia, particularly in the 1970s, but they didn't get the scale or sort of professional organisation behind them to really make them a success. So it's, in theory, I think it's a very attractive thing, but in practice, it hasn't taken off in Australia. We've tended either to go for public housing or community housing run by organisations like Junction and Uniting Care, or we've tended to go to home ownership where we don't have to you might have a strata or a community title, but generally it's not. That cooperative housing has not been a big feature of Australian life.
Yes. Now you've just mentioned actually Junction. They've got some very interesting developments occurring. What's your interaction with organisations like that?
Well, they're regulated by the housing trust, by the housing trust and its offices, but they run as a private entity. They rent out at 75% of market rent, along with expanding public housing through the housing trust. We've also expanded community housing as well. I think they've risen by about 700 so far, and there's probably about another 400 or 500 builds that are coming through the system. And just today I was down at Seaton, turning the sod on a new site, 42 apartments and a 5-story block that will be, rented out to people who need stable rental at a discounted rate. So, we are expanding that um, sector, and Junction is obviously a very kind of entrepreneurial community housing provider, and they're sort of always out there sort of developing the next site, which is what we like to see.
Ah, okay, cool. Um, so you mentioned earlier the rent to own scheme. How do you run that? How does that work?
Well, it's run through the Housing Trust. We assess applicants on their income. They have to be working. They have to have a stable working life, and they have to have been in the rental market for more than 2 years. So we're targeting long-term renters, and these are people who nurses, labourers. They keep society together. They're very hard-working people. They're the sort of people who 10 or 15 years ago wouldn't have needed any help. They would have got a loan and got into housing before it took off. But now they've been locked out of the housing market. And one of the things, every time they save a deposit, the house price goes up. So then they can't get out of rental. And we need to get them out of rental and into home ownership. It does two good things then, frees up the rental market. And gets people into home ownership who should be in home ownership. So it's really about giving them a bit of help. They sign a lease on the day they move in. They also sign their their sale contract on the day they move in, and then they get to buy it 2 years later at today's price, and they get discounted rent in between times. And it's been a very successful program. The first couple of people to enter it have now, are now in the process of buying their homes, and we want to do, 2,000 other homes over the next 6 years.
Well, yes, I'm going to say there would have been time now then you start to see some people purchasing. So now, actually, let's go on to your seat of Taylor. It's to the north of Adelaide, I guess north, should we say northeast? You don't have overlap with Macon, do you?
Well, not really to the
North,
northeast, more Northern Plains, Andrews
Northern
Farm,
Plains, yes.
Angle Vale, Virginia. Yeah. So, it's in the past, it would have been, farmland or horticultural land.
Yep.
Now it's suburbs and still a big chunk of the horticultural industry around Virginia, expanding townships in Angle Vale, and of course a big chunk of the northern suburbs Riverlea and the like. So it's a fast-growing electorate.
Yeah. So what are the big topics that you get people talking about? You're not door knocking probably regularly now, but when you do, what themes come up?
I went out. I went out door knocking about a week and a half ago, I think,
Cool.
and it's always a good thing to do. Um, Keep your feet on the ground and all the rest of it when you're in politics. Look, the main issues are always the stock standard issues of good schools and good housing
Okay.
and good and health. That's not radically different anywhere else. I guess the big issues in places like Anglevale are the growth and managing the growth and making sure we've got coordinated development fronts that put in roads and infrastructure contemporaneously with putting in the houses. And that was something in South Australia we were very good at. If you think of developments around Elizabeth and Golden
Yeah.
Grove and West Lakes, and there was a pile of really great developments, Marion, back in the day. And then somewhere between, the end of Golden Grove and Mount Barker and Anglevale starting, we weren't so good. Previous governments, both Labor and Liberal, didn't get it quite right. So one of the things we're doing at Anglevale is what's called the Anglevale Infrastructure Scheme. We're doing the same thing at Mount Barker, which is really about putting in place the infrastructure that will facilitate the housing, make it a nice suburban place to live, which it is already. But if you can't get down the road, or if the school's not in the right place, or any of that, it can detract from people's enjoyment living in a community. So we want to make sure that gets right, and that's probably the biggest outstanding issue in the electorate is one of infrastructure.
Actually, that reminds me. Is there an issue in Mount Barker about there's a restaurant there that you're
Yeah, yeah.
taking
Well,
out?
look, I mean, that's the debate about where we put a primary school. I mean, it's a
Mm,
good, in a way, it's a community asset. We're talking about a primary school. The issue in Mount Barker is that wasn't planned out before we did the rezoning, and so it has led to issues, as has Hyson Boulevard not being finished, things like that. So one of the things we've done with Concordia, which is a sort of one of the newest
yeah.
suburbs that's coming in, is put in place an infrastructure scheme, worked out where the schools are roughly going to be, the areas, um, where the shopping centre is going to be, where the main roads are going to be, and plotted all of that out in a concept plan so that you don't have to do this as you go. It's a very inefficient way to do it if you do things as suburbs grow. So having that plan, and executing it is an important thing.
So I said earlier you're obviously state parliament, prior to that federal parliament, and
Yeah.
supervising the state in the trade union. So what's brought you into this form of public service? What have been the drivers? What were the drivers?
Oh, look, I was at uni. It seems like a eon ago now. The 1990 sort of three election, 1992, 93. I joined the Labor Party. Keating versus Hewson, fight back. The GST.
Hmm.
The Liberal Party had very radical plans to institute GST, to get rid of Medicare, to get rid of trade unions and awards, or to heavily restrict trade unions and get rid of the award system. I didn't think any of that was good. I joined the Labor Party, and when I ran for Parliament in the federal Parliament, it was around work choices, around the industrial
Okay.
relations system. So broadly speaking, the reasons why I joined the Labor Party are the reasons why I'm in public life, why I ran for Parliament in the federal Parliament. I did my time in Canberra, 15 years. It was a fair innings, and the Premier sort of I wanted me to come back, wanted me to play a role in state politics, and I was happy to do it. And of course, I've sort of really been doing housing most of that time, and been in the thick of what is a big challenge for the community.
Yes, big topic, big topic. And now finally, yes, go. So where does the name champion come from? What's your background?
It's English. You wouldn't be surprised to know,
Yes.
but it was originally it was Champagné, Champagné with a
Ah,
so champ and then an E back in the 1500s. So I suspect the original sort of champion name got anglicised in about 1500. Prior to that, I suspect they were Norman settlers, inverted commas, and probably came from sort of that northern bit of France, which had been settled by Vikings, made good. So it's
Vikings
we
made
can
good.
track the name all the way back.
That's a
Yeah,
good expression.
yeah,
Vikings
it's
made
right.
good. Okay.
Not much Viking left, and not much Norman left. Very English, but my father was a Londoner, and most of the rest of the family on my maternal side came from either England or Ireland or that sort of part of the world.
And you maintain contacts
No
with those?
Italian, unfortunately.
No, no, dear. So do you maintain
No,
contact with those
no. So
families?
I've look, with the English side, yes, yeah. I had grandparents in England, and I've got aunts and uncles there. Not close contact, but it's the odd email and Christmas card and that sort of thing. If I'm in the UK, I'll drop in, but yeah, very firmly Australian now.
Very good. Cool. Okay. Well, thank you very much. Well, actually, on that note, did your parents come out to Australia? What was the or
Yeah, my
about?
dad was a 10 pound pom. Yeah, 10 pound pom. Dad was in about sort of the 60s, late 60s. My maternal side had been here. Believe it or not, we got two convicts, so
Okay.
they were not brought here voluntarily. Um, they were transported at the pleasure of Her Majesty, and ended up in sort of Western Victoria.
Cool. Okay. Well, thank you again. Thank you very much, Nick Champion, for coming on to Radio Italian Adelaide and for a pleasant, enjoyable conversation.
Thanks, mate.